thinker. Debra Lee Baldwin is kind of the succulent person now in the United States. She is an award-winning... I'm going to embarrass her. She told me to say something short, but I don't want to do that.
I did not.
She would have. But award-winning author, award-winning photojournalist. Fortunately for us, she's a San Diego resident. Isn't that nice? And she is as responsible for the interest in succulents, I think, as any single person. Her first succulent book came out and just kind of lit up the gardening world. It became the best-selling book in the gardening arena. And then she was nice to follow that up a couple of years later with Succulent Gardening Containers. If you have this book and you'd like her to sign it, she'll be doing that after the program. If you don't have the book, how unfortunate. Look, we happen to have some. Just terrific books and meant for home gardeners. They're not too technical. They're just great inspiration, great ideas, great combinations. And there's even a picture or two from Roger's garden.
There he is.
Isn't that nice? I don't know what else to say. She's the genius of succulent creations and gardening. So it's all downhill from here, Debra.
All the way in the back, all the way to Costa Mesa. Wow, thank you all for coming. Oh, look, even over here, I'm so honored and overwhelmed. I mean, this is Roger's Gardens. I mean, I grew up in Southern California listening to people say the words Roger's Gardens with reverence as the mecca of gardening. This is where I would come with my garden club on field trips. And look, oh my goodness, now I'm standing here talking to you. It truly is a dream come true. And I'm very honored. And I apologize that you're sitting in full sun. That can be miserable. If you do want to get up and leave, you will not hurt my feelings. I understand. I had expected cloud cover. I don't know why the order for that didn't go through. Some glitch. But here we are. Anyway, I've got so much to tell you about today. I can't stand it. I don't know hardly where to begin. But I have some big news that has to do with Corona del Mar. Yes, right here in Corona del Mar, there is a bluff-top garden overlooking the coast, owned by the Segerstrom family. Now, those of you who have lived here for any length of time know that the Segerstroms own South Coast Plaza. And Anton Segerstrom is into succulents. So over the years, he has created, with the help of Joe Stead, a horticulturist on staff at Orange Coast College, a beautiful bluff-top garden. Now, this works for several reasons. Not only does it give them a great view from their picture windows of colorful, interesting, architectural, geometric plants, very collectible plants, but it doesn't block their view, because these are short, low-growing plants. Also, as you know, the bluff-top environment is fragile. Succulents are shallow-rooted, so they're not encroaching on that fragile area there. Well, I had the privilege of visiting this garden and scouting it for Sunset Magazine. And that's how I got my start as a writer for the San Diego Union Tribune on the topic of homes and gardens and interior design, that sort of thing. After doing a lot of feature articles for them and becoming proficient in my personal hobby of gardening, I began to scout for major magazines. And that just means going around visiting great gardens. Sometimes on tour, but I would generally call and say, can I come a day before so that I don't have to shoot around the lady in the red sweater? So anyway, I scouted the Segerstrom garden. Joe Stead took me there, and I showed it to Sunset. And it captured the imagination of Kathy Brenzel, the editor, the garden editor at Sunset, who's been there for a quarter of a century. And she saw something magical there. Something that Joe and Anton had known subliminally, but maybe it hadn't really sunk in. And that was the coastline and the tide pools down below the bluffs were brought into the garden by all of these plants that sort of look like undersea flora and fauna. Now, we've done stories, Sunset's done stories on undersea themed gardens. Jeff Morris, Solana Succulents, south of here in Solana Beach, is very well known for that. But this is the first time Sunset's going to do a tide pool garden story. It is going into the September issue, which will come out in mid-August. It started out as a 2-page spread, meaning, 2 pages, open it up, that's a spread. The photography, and this was done by Sunset's professional photographer, turned out so well that the editor said, gosh, we got to do more than a 2-page spread. It's going to be a 3-page spread, 6 pages. Now, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Sunset has 6 regional editions. That means what normally is in Southern California only runs in Southern California. But sometimes a story is so momentous, so eye-catching, so exciting, so visually stimulating, so amazing that it runs in several editions. This one is running in all 6. That means that your relatives in Seattle and Phoenix will see it when they're in line at Vaughn's with their quarter milk. They will be able to pick up the magazine and open to that spread and say, Costa Mesa? Why, isn't that where Mary lives, or Susan? Yeah, and fingers crossed, I don't know yet. I called Sunset yesterday to find out. They still didn't know. These decisions are made by Time Warner in New York. This could be the first garden cover that Sunset has had in 4 years. Wow. Yeah, that's a wow. Right here in Costa Mesa. So fingers crossed. All right, in honor of the tide pool garden story, I am going to be talking about undersea looking succulents and making a couple of arrangements for you, suggesting how you too can have a tide pool garden, even if you don't own a house right on the bluffs overlooking Arch Rock. Regardless of where you live, even if you have a balcony, a patio, you can have an undersea themed or tide pool garden succulent arrangement. So let's talk about some plants. And as far as time goes, I'm just going to do what I'm going to do. And hopefully I'll talk for about 45 minutes to an hour, take some questions, then I'll do a book signing. As I said, if you feel the need to get up and go, the restrooms are over there. The shade is non-existent. So let's talk about plants. Have you noticed how beautifully Roger set up this display for today with succulents everywhere? Now this was the it plant a year ago. I mean, this was a plant that collectors were paying, upwards of $50 for. Gosh, what's for sale here? Okay, about half that. So the prices come down, the plants got even more beautiful. This is Kalanchoe luciae variegata, or the cultivar name is fantastic, Kalanchoe fantastic. It is a variegate of the regular green and red one, which means you can see some cream on it. So it's got that beautiful difference in colors. It seems like every year there's a different it plant that everybody has to have. It's like fashion. And now this is it. This is it? Yeah, this is it. Lots of other cool plants here. I don't have time to go over them all, but I wanted to call your attention to these amazing urn arrangements. Isn't that something that Rogers, who is known for their European sophisticated style, that looks like something you'd see in front of Blenheim Palace has brought that into the look of succulents. Succulents, which most people associated with a desert as recently as 3 years ago, 4 years ago, maybe 10. Different now, isn't it? Look at these rosette forms. Aren't they beautiful? These floral shapes that suggest roses. So if you're into English country gardening, which does look like Eden, even though it's very high maintenance and flowers are ephemeral, go with succulents. Go with the rosette succulents because they'll give you that look. They'll give you the look of flowers without fading. They're fleshy-leaved plants. Succulents, by definition, are plants that survive periods of drought by storing water in fleshy leaves and stems. That means that unlike roses, which are very thin-petaled, and you're lucky if you get a week on a flower, a rosette succulent will last for years. And they bloom! Ta-da! So you get that much more bang for your buck. So you get a long-lasting show. As far as our undersea-looking plants, well, you know, this is so much fun. This is my tide pool. I have a smaller tide pool over here. I just walked through the nursery with a cart, and my mantra was, undersea look, undersea look, undersea look. What looks like something that I might see snorkeling past a coral reef? There's so many succulents that do. We have, oh my goodness, the aloes. Aloes, how incredible is that? Does nature have a sense of humor? You know, these dry climate plants that get by on very little water look like starfish, something that grows in an aquatic environment. Aloes are excellent plants for undersea tide pool compositions. Look at them, these dwarf aloes in particular. Now, aloes, as you're no doubt aware, or maybe you're not, are these huge plants here. This is Aloe marlothii, and you respect it because it's prickle. You know, it's kind of like an agave. It's a keep-away plant, but oh my gosh, the flowers in proportion to the size of the plant are incredible. It is a statement plant in your landscape. It is not something you would put in a tide pool garden. It gets huge. However, there are new aloe cultivars that have been introduced primarily to be used as container plants and really aren't recommended for the garden. So we have here a cultivar, let's see, this is called Christmas Carol because it's so red. I imagine a lot of these are Kelly Griffin hybrids. Kelly is a San Diego resident, very well known in the Cactus and Succulent Society. This one doesn't have a cultivar name on it, but look at that color. Do you know that of all the colors that you can put in your garden, white stands out more than any? After that is red. So anything white that you use is really going to make a statement. Very popular dwarf aloe. Probably the most popular is Aloe Pink Blush. Great performing plant. It's got what looks like splinters along the leaves. It has a very interesting texture. And at the Huntington, there's also a hybridizer. I don't know if this was a Kelly Griffin or I forget her name. Does anyone remember the hybridizer of aloes at the Huntington? Karen, somebody or other? Anyway, we've got great hybridizers at major botanical institutions and nurseries right here in Southern California. You live in the Mecca of all things succulent. Anything I show you, anything I mention in my books, you can grow. I live in North San Diego County in the foothills at 1,500 feet. I get frost in the winter and desert heat in the summer, and I have microclimates in which I grow my succulents. I wish I lived closer to the coast because then I could grow everything and not worry about extreme heat and sun and cold in the winter. Because by and large, the smooth-leaved succulents do need protection from hot sun. Look at you. Some of you are fanning yourselves. You are like succulents. If it is too hot and uncomfortable for you, it would be for a succulent. They need some shade this time of the year. Okay? If you were sitting there wearing a sweater and you were too cold, your succulents would probably be feeling the same way. Okay? They adapt, though. They adapt. But When you bring a tender, lovely plant home from the nursery, notice where it was in the nursery when you bought it. Was it in full sun? Was it in part shade? Take it and give it that same condition in your home. Because otherwise, especially a plant like this, which has very little chlorophyll, is going to sunburn. The more red a succulent has in its leaves, the less likely it is to sunburn, or brown, or gray. Okay? Look at this aloe. This aloe has been around forever. This is the partridge breast aloe, Aloe variegata, beautifully striped, an incredible little plant. It was discovered in the 1800s in South Africa and brought back and proceeded to be a container plant, windowsill plant in English gardens for years and years, and now we have it. It is freely offsetting, meaning that it will produce puffs around the base, which will take over anything you planted in, which is kind of nice. I mean, it's free plants, right? You can give it to your friends and neighbors. So I selected that because that looked like something I might see in the ocean. But for any composition, you want to do a high element, a low element, and a cascading element. With a tide pool garden, you can be a little bit more creative with that. You can look down into it if you want to. Now, because it would be difficult for some of you to see what I'm doing if I actually planted deep in this pot, I'm not going to make an arrangement that you look down into. I'm going to make more of an undersea themed composition. I'm going to start, well, should I start with my small pot first or big? What do you say? Big. Everybody wants the big. Okay, you want to go for the big drama first, and if I get around to it, I'll do the other one. But I get to talking, and I stand in front of an empty pot forever. So for our tall elements, I have this Senecio. This is a funny little plant. I forget the species on that. But doesn't that look like something you'd see under the ocean? Nice high element. This is just plain old Crassula ovata, jade plant. It's a little different. It's golem. It has those leaves that are, I'm already dirty. Look at that. The first plant slid it out of the pot. Should have known not to wear white. And for my tide pool arrangement, I have some lava rock, volcanic rock. A lot of reefs are made out of that. Roger's very kindly provided shells, so I have a lot of really lovely shells here. Love the colors on these. You can play with that. You know, whatever you're going to be accessorizing your composition with, and the accessories go last, just as you would a room. The throw pillows are the last thing to go in. But notice the colors in these, and those wonderful oranges and blues, those are colors found in succulents. So you can play with that, and certainly we have some of those reds here, not so much, a little bit of the blue. Look at that. No kidding, look at this. This is another crassula. Look at the colors on that. How beautifully those go. So we're getting an element of repetition. And I actually like that a little bit better than this because of that element of repetition. So I'm just going to set this aside for now. Not a lot of room. Okay, well remember that's there. Back, where's its top? All right, I'll put it back for now. Because if we've got this fabulous blue plant, and it's high, and it's going with one of our decorative items, let's use it. So I didn't really plan what I'm doing today. I'm winging it, and this should be very reassuring to you because I am not a professional designer. I am a journalist primarily who is into gardening. So I learned from following professional designers around scouting and seeing what they were doing. Now this, I actually need a steak knife to get into this. So what I could do is I could just take cuttings instead. Where's Ron? Do we have a serrated knife anywhere? You know what? It doesn't matter. I'm just going to break it apart. It is like concrete in that pot. Oh. Why not?
What's the name of the
This is a crassula. It's in the jade plant family. It has wavy leaves. Anybody want that? Where's the pocket with that? I'll tell you what the holes are.
Right there.
Oh, okay. Let's see what's said on the pot. Gosh, there's so many different. Here we go. Oh, it's not a crassula. It's Cotyledon orbiculata. Lighthouse Road, common name pig's ears. Okay, so, well, unfortunate common name. If nobody asked me, I would give it a nicer common names. So now we have our cotyledon, and it's giving us that beautiful repetition of the shells that are going to go in later. And yes, all of those broken pieces, as shocking as that is, are going to root. Although I don't have a root ball now to make this higher, so I'm going to need a high element because that has now become a medium element.
What kind of soil do you have in there?
I have just regular cactus mix from the nursery. I have, my recommendation for soil is to take any kind of regular potting mix, the cheapest you can find at your nursery, and mix it half and half with humus. Now, most of you who subscribe to my email updates know how I make my own mix. And that is to, let's set that aside for a minute. I mix regular potting soil half and half with dry stall, which I get at a tack and feed store. And that, it's just pure pumice. It's 2 words, D-R-Y, second word, S-T-A-L-L. And you just walk in, you don't ask for pumice, they won't know what you're talking about. And buy a bag, 40 pounds for about $11. I can barely lift it. They'll put it in your car for you. And then you just keep that bag open next to your bag of potting soil and just toss them together. You know, it's that simple. So we've got some starfish here. We've got an upright element. We've got our cotyledon orbiculata there in the back. That aloe had a lot of roots on it. Let's trim some of those off. Aloes are so vigorous. So I'm getting these spaghetti-like roots off. Doesn't really matter. You know, you can set root balls of succulents right on top of the soil. I am very careful when I handle the leaves of succulents because any damage to a succulent leaf is going to be permanent. They keep their leaves forever. I'm not careful when I'm handling the roots of a succulent. They don't need their roots. They have everything they need in the leaves, in the plant itself, except for the very fine leaf succulents like these sedums. They don't have as much leaf storage capacity as the fatter leaf succulents. So if you can take a succulent and its leaves are soft and flexible and thin, it's going to need its roots and it's going to need more water than old Big Blue over here. I mean, look at that. That is a water storage organ. They're just full of water, which makes them great plants for perimeter areas for people. Do you know what I just did? I just put my thumb on a slug. I felt something under my thumb. I mean, we're all gardeners, right? It doesn't bother us to put our thumbs on a slug. I wore nice shoes for you today, and I stepped on a snail. I think that one I saw over there on the succulent. So there you go, desiccate. Dry out. Yeah, you know, gardens are a Pandora's box. You just never know what you're going to run across in the garden. We try to create Eden. The garden is man's way of trying to replicate Eden or foreshadow heaven. But it's not that easy. All right, so you see the plant material I've chosen here. This is another Senecio. It looks like Vitalis. It's green. It has that sort of a seagrass look, and I'm going to repeat that. Nice to have repetitions. Start with your largest upright plants first. Really jam them in there so that they stand up nice and tall and don't flop. This pot was full of soil when I started planting it. And I'm putting the root balls right on top of the soil because I want a high and mounded look. I mean, when you look at something like this, that urn was filled with soil and probably mounded when they started planting it. And then they put the root balls right into mounded soil. So don't be afraid to plant high with your succulents. If root balls are exposed, you can always conceal them. After all, look at this pile of stuff I've got here. That'll help hide the root balls. So I've got my upright elements. I want to think about how this is going to look like an undersea scene. Does it look like something that you might see snorkeling past?
Yeah.
Not yet. Somebody over here said no. You're right, we're not there yet. But if you start with smart plants, plants that you know have that look, as you go on, they're going to help you with that. And I'm having a hard time making these Senecio stand upright, so it's time to use a rock. Rocks are good for bolstering plants that don't cooperate. And if you want to, you can bolster it on more than one side. Stand up. Darn it. There you go. Okay, so we're getting there. We've got our high element, we've got some medium elements. And now let's create kind of a beach or a smaller area in the front. And if you had white sand or even decomposed granite, you could do that. I love having different heights in a composition. It looks more natural. You know, our tendency as humans is to make straight lines and to make everything even. You notice what you're sitting on are all straight lines. That's because a person, a man or a woman, designed it and built it. You're not sitting on something that is all wavy.
Front cover of Sunset, right there.
Yeah. Sunset cover. Smile. Smile, everybody. This is for my publicist. Okay.
We're going for the New York Times.
All right, so now I have some options. Oh gosh, you know, look at this great thing. And that's in the right blue, too. This is, oh gosh, what are you? Raise your hand if you know what you are. Rogers has got so many cool things now. It starts with an A. Anybody? And it forms little roots right at the leaf axils, right along the stem, and it does look very undersea. I haven't used my partridge breast aloe, and that would really stand out in this composition, but I'm getting to the point now where I'm pretty full, and it's time to start using some low elements. And this, I think, has a really good look. This is red. This would work, too. But I'm going to go ahead with this. Anybody want cutting of pig's ear? All right, now I've made some room. And I'm going to use my sedum. Let's direct. Let me answer your question about callousing. To go by the book, when you have a juicy cut end, you want to let it dry because when you stick it in the soil, as I did this one, or all of these rather, that juicy cut end, you see now it's covered with dirt. Dirt's full of microbes and bacteria. Those can potentially go into this plant and cause rot. So if this were a valuable plant, in other words, if I'd actually paid for it, I might be a little bit more careful. And what you do then is it's called callousing. You let it sit for a day or two and it forms a thin membrane over the cut end. And from that membrane will grow new roots. But you know, with most succulents, they're all about reproduction. They're randy little plants. They have, well, most plants are. They live to reproduce. They're all about reproduction. How can I make more of myself? And they just have all kinds of great methods of doing that. And with succulents, they start very readily from cuttings, from the meristem cells at the leaf axils. Gee, now that I've thrown everything away, I don't have anything with leaf axils. Here we go. Okay. So everywhere there was a leaf attached, and you can see this is very obvious on this. Those are meristem cells. And from those growth points, roots will form. Now, you'll also get new roots from right around the inside of the tissue there, like the bark, and from the callus in some instances. So these are very good plants for reproducing. They're very efficient at it. So I can't see this from a distance. How are we? Oh yeah, I like that. I'm seeing some root balls that I don't want to look at. So let's hide that. I think this is out of scale, out of proportion to my scene. And what I think of when I'm doing a succulent composition is it's all about the plants. I don't want a throw pillow to get in the way and call too much attention to itself. I want to showcase the plants. I want them to be what people's eyes go to. And everything else is just enhancing that. But I do have some root balls to conceal, and I've got some gorgeous shells. I would be ashamed not to use them. And in any composition, when you are adding accessories, you don't want to just lay them on top. You want to bury them somewhat so that they look like they've been there for a while, not just plumped. So I've got a shell sticking kind of partway out there. And these stunning shells here too are so beautiful. These colors. I want that to repeat. This is repeating the color of the terracotta. It's repeating the color of the dwarf aloe over there. So let's have some of that sticking out, unless it's calling too much attention, oops, to itself. Maybe a little bit, that's okay. And we'll repeat that over here. It's just too pretty not to use. Do you know some of these blue shells are called Laguna shells? Did you know that? And I've seen designers use them really well. All right, I think we need one more shell just to repeat the beauty of the Laguna shells. I hope you can see what I'm doing. Need a mirror, like a cooking demonstration, don't I? All right, and then I have smooth, rounded shells. Keep in mind, when you're doing any kind of undersea composition, what sort of rocks you might actually see under the ocean. And now we can go into our smaller lava rocks and use some of those to bolster and to make things stand up. Yeah, some of these pretty shells, the pretty rocks, nice smooth rocks down there. I don't want black. You know what I was saying about white being what stands out the most in a garden? Black disappears. You might as well not even have it unless you put it in front of something light. So that extremely popular succulent, Alien Zwart cup, make sure you put that in front of something where it'll stand out. They have it here, they've got it in front of a planting of orangey flowers, and it does stand out. But for such a popular plant, it really doesn't stand out. So it's a little disappointing, I think, from a design standpoint. And in fact, when I see it in a garden I'm scouting or visiting, I don't even photograph. I forgot about our white starfish. Let's find a great place to put that. And that'll make the statement that yes, this is an undersea composition. It's got a flower on it. Do you see flowers under the ocean? No. So I'm taking it off. It's the Morticia Adams approach to garden design. If there's a flower, cut it off. All right, so now we have that, and I think all we need is just a little bit more top dressing. Top dressing is a must because it hides the soil just as you would in your gardens. You want to hide any bare dirt. Okay, overgrown compositions, what to do about them? Well, you know they're going to be a great source of cuttings for you. And as with anything, and I think this is, it frustrates me a little bit that people, and I don't mean you, but a lot of people have the assumption that succulents are like plastic. You know, they don't grow. But they are living entities, and they do grow. And they, depending on the type of plant, it may just get real leggy. You know, it may get real shrubby. It may, well, graptopetalums will get leggy. These will grow into more of a shrub shape. They're very polite plants. These will puff all over the place and crowd other plants out. Some of the dwarf aloes are mound forming. They grow into colonies. This is a good example. Look at all of those babies around the edge of that. And so you're buying one plant? No, you're buying a dozen. And you can separate this, break it apart, and you will have, oh gosh, you know, you can start it in a bunch of different pots. I was talking about reproduction. Look at this. I can show you this. But anyway, about the overgrown composition. Okay, there's no roots attached to that, but they're all on the stem. And so that plant is telling you, cut me apart. Those are my new roots, my aerial roots. That's what I want to have grow into the ground. So yes, you do have to refresh compositions, and the more packed they are to begin with, the more floral-like they are to begin with, the more they're going to outgrow and get too big and look messy over time. So think of a tightly packed floral composition like this as a floral arrangement with lasting power. Those plants are not going to die. They're going to be absolutely fine, but they're going to get to the point where they're crowding, they're pushing, they're up, it's out of balance, and that's going to be the time to edit that. So it looks beautiful now, it'll look beautiful for the next 6 months, but then it's really going to need to be edited and pulled apart and replanted. Does that make sense? Does that help? Okay, and also, on my blog, I blog at gardeninggonewild.com, and there's a link to my blog from my website. You will find a blog post that I did titled How to Fluff Your Succulents, meaning you take an overgrown composition and you just tear it apart and replant it, and it shows there. So if you Google Debra Lee Baldwin, it'll take you to my website, and you can scroll down to that particular post. Now you see, I've almost filled this container. And I don't know if you noticed, but I was mixing half and half potting soil. I opened the bag upside down. That's cactus mix. You could just use cactus mix. But that, you know, it's a little pricey. That's, well, not terrible. Ron. Okay, not a bad price, really. What do they sell pumice for? Remember what I told you about pumice for?
20% off today, though.
Yeah, you have your coupons. I don't know if they're good for dry goods. So $5 for that. Okay, so you can get 40 pounds of this.
Supposed to say only $5.
Only $4.99.
You gotta carry it out for $5.
Yeah. All right. Question? Yes. Yes. It depends on your soil. If you're doing a large planting in the ground, the question was in-ground amendment. If you're doing a large bed, you're going to want to really understand your soil, and even you know, if it's something that's an investment to your home, like you know, your front bed, maybe even have a soil analysis. Because there's so many different kinds of soils, it's very hard to generalize on that topic. But by and large, and I mean, who's going to have a soil analysis? I mean, really, just gosh, just bring in as much pumice as you can here in Southern California, because we have really dense soils. We also have sandy soils, but you can't go wrong with pumice, because the whole point of pumice, and I didn't explain this earlier, and dry stall, is that it absorbs moisture in horse stalls. So horses don't have problems with their hooves, and it keeps the horse stall drier. So that's, you know, it does the same thing for the soils. It lightens them. I should get a cut from dry stall. You know, really, I have told so many people about dry stall. It's ridiculous. They do not know I exist. I want to use this aloe, this partridge breast aloe variegata. Isn't it gorgeous?
Deborah, does that aloe get larger or just multiply in pups?
It doesn't get much larger. This is one of the diminutive aloes, which is one of the reasons it makes such a good container plant. And it will get to about, what's that, about 12 inches tall and slightly wider. It is a stacked aloe. Look at that geometry on that. Isn't that exquisite? And the variegation. I mean, you can see why it's been just a star performer for, over a century. But it will puff and it will get wider. It will create a colony. Oh yeah, I like that over there on the side. Just kind of adding a little variegation and balancing the aloe on the other side. I don't even think I need or want a trailing element here. After all, that is not necessarily what you would see under the sea. Okay, so how about shells or any doodads to go in here? I know you're all thinking, gee, is Roger's going to give that away too? I hope she throws in some of those really pretty shells. What you probably would love is maybe one of these shells, but look at that's out of scale with that. That so doesn't work. I'm so sorry. Should I throw this to the audience? Ron's like, no. This is a pretty shell. I love that. But the shell is really causing too much distraction to the plants, and they can't have that. Oh yeah, we can. That's actually really pretty. I like that. Let's do one more shell. We'll work it in. We'll make it work.
See, Deborah,
Yes.
with large-scale aloes planted in the yard and then hit by the sprinkler system, is that going to kind of destroy the leaves in the plant over time?
Okay, aloes in the yard hit by the sprinkler system. In other words, can aloes handle overhead watering, basically? Oh yeah. Yeah, they're fine. I'm trying to think what doesn't handle. There's a lot of plants that are not real happy with a lot of overhead watering. It'll spot the leaves. Aeonium Zorkop, which I mentioned earlier, the black aeonium, that'll get water spots. You can kind of get the idea. That we have high element in the back. This is a composition that's viewed primarily from one side rather than all sides. Hence, the higher plants in the back, framing, the shorter ones in the front. Thank you. And the rule of thumb, I have a really great rule of thumb for you when it comes to watering your succulents. Thank you, Ron. The fatter and fleshier the succulent, this is common sense, the more moisture it holds in its leaves. And there are rotund succulents, like the euphorbias, the columnar euphorbias, certainly a lot of cactus, that are just water tanks. And you can see why, because they're from very arid parts of the world. Yeah, that looks better now. They're not, when it rains, boy, you know, they absorb it. They hang on to it. But for most of the year, it doesn't rain, and they don't know what to do if they're given a lot of water. Their roots just aren't set up to handle it. So the rule of thumb is, the fatter and fleshier the succulent, the less water it needs, and the less frequently it should be watered, and the less water it wants. The skinnier the leaf, the finer the leaf on the succulent. Like these, a lot of these sedums have very fine leaves. Here's a skinny leaf succulent here. I saw another one, and I think I might have used, oh yeah, this one. This is sedum dragon's blood. Thin-leaved succulents are much more receptive to having more water and appreciate it. But a lot of succulents are surprised and delighted by water. It's like, whoo, where'd that come from? And your yuccas, their water tanks are their trunks. And when it rains, they just slurp it up. And if you irrigate them, they grow like crazy. They're like, I've died and gone to heaven. So that's a plant that you can give more water to if you want to encourage growth. So by and large, it's common sense. Look at the plant. Listen to what it's telling you. I'm fat, don't water me. Okay? I'm skinny, I'm gasping. Look at the leaves sometimes, if they lose their sheen, if they've gotten shriveled. Looking at the tips, that's an indication that it wants more water. Less water, oh my gosh. Very hard to tell when you've overwatered a succulent and you've lost it. Generally, the base of the plant will get mushy. Something like this, which has a trunk in the ground, overwatered, you would notice probably first that the very base, where it goes into the ground, there's that dear man over there that I hit with a plant. I feel like I should apologize to you. If you can squeeze the stem and it's mushy, it's a goner. That means the roots have rotted and rot is starting to go up the trunk. However, the rest of the plant is fine. So just take cuttings. You know, break it apart. Yeah.
Underneath, I've got some colors.
Okay, so she's got a kumquat tree. She is planting her succulents under it, and they seem to like being understory
Are
plants.
they getting, are they getting too much water and that's why they're growing so fast?
I don't know, they're doing great. You know, it's not broke, is it? No. Well, okay, see her afterwards, she's doing it right. Okay, but basically the irrigation to your kumquat tree is also benefiting your succulents, as is the microclimate created by that kumquat tree. Do you mind my asking where you live?
Yorba Linda?
Yorba Linda. Okay, so it's hot. And so those plants are getting,
They're not, they
oh,
don't
okay,
get full sun.
they're in a patio, but they're benefiting from a microclimate created from the tree that's shading them. So that's very true of a lot of these plants that come from South Africa, Madagascar, not from the desert Southwest. They're going to want to be protected from full hot sun and from frost. And you'll also get frost protection if you grow them as understory plants. And I think I have time for one more question, Ron. What do you think?
Sure, I think so.
Okay.
Nobody's
Oh my
faded
goodness,
yet.
we have a lot of different, well, he seems to think we've got time. Oh, okay, gosh. That's an enthusiastic person. Yeah, when planting this container?
Do you take into consideration the different types of thicker leaves and smaller?
Okay, do I take into consideration thick and thin? You know, that's a great question because I just told you the rule of thumb. And yet you're looking at this composition that I've made, and lo and behold, we have some thick-stemmed succulents and some thin-stemmed ones. What does that mean, doctor? What are we going to do about that? Does that mean that the fatter one is going to suffer? Well, you know, actually, these are all considered mid-thickness succulents. If I had put a rotund euphorbia or a cactus in this composition, I would have put it on a mound, probably in the back, so because it would show better there, or on the side of a mound in a larger bowl, or in any composition, more pumice for that particular plant. But if you're careful when you water, the ones with the thin leaves will be okay even if they're a little bit starved for water, and the ones with the thick leaves are okay if they get a little bit too much. These are very adaptable plants. It's just a few that are really sensitive, and those are the ones to know about. Do you know I have a hard time growing cactus? Because I tend to water everything the same, and the cactus gets too much water. So now I cluster my cactus, and I'm very careful to water them a great deal less than everything else, because I know that I have that tendency just to get out the hose and spray everything, and the succulents are fine. But my goodness, I mean, I'm going on vacation, and I am so aware of microclimates in my garden. I can tell you within 6 inches if something's gonna get too much or too little sun. I mean, I'm that weird about it. But I want to make sure that plants that have been in a partial shade location don't suddenly get sun scorched by being moved out, or if they're not watered while I'm gone, that they're by being somewhat desiccated, they're not going to be overly stressed by too much sun, by whatever kind of August heat wave we might have. So as you get to know the plants, you'll get to understand that, more about them. You'll have trial and error, just as you've done with everything you've done in the garden. But by and large, these are the easiest plants to grow. Don't get hung up on formulas, on worrying about them. Play with them, experiment with them, start them from cuttings, get them from your neighbors, buy them from Rogers. You know, play with them. Don't take them too seriously. Don't take me too seriously. Thank you.